to see you. If you look at the, let's go through the rules quickly. You have to switch off your video and mute your microphone. Please write your student number in the chat. If you have any queries, please send them to ctintat@unisa.ac.za. If you have admin queries, you can send them to ctintat@unisa.ac.za. My email is italiam@unisa.ac.za. And if you need help from the local library, they seem to have open parts of the campus, so maybe you can phone and find out. It's ctinlib@unisa.ac.za. Our next class is at 8 October, and that's next week. Then there's a feedback form somewhere, usually under the files, and this session is being recorded. Today we are going to look at academic writing in detail, and academic writing starts with conscious reading. That means that while you are reading, you are already preparing to write properly. So I'm going to go to the process from reading properly to writing academically. As you are reading, you have to find out or make sure that you know exactly what the main theories in your field are. Often it's enough to refer to the name of a theory. Like if I speak to, I often speak of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not necessary to fill up the page with everything. I can just use that terminology and my reader understand it. So as you are reading, you need to know the main theories. Then it is also important to know who are the experts in your field. You are going to come back to it, but you need to know who is the most important. You must actually be able to build a kind of hierarchy of experts. Then you also, at this stage, many of you are working on a research proposal. And that means that you need to know what are the best practices in your field. If we look at the medical field, we would say hygiene is one of the best practices. But the research practice is usually blind randomized trials. So by the time that you start with your research proposal, these are the things that you need to know. I want to work with you through an example. I've chosen the American situation where they have to do, they must be the only country in the world who still needs to be convinced that people should wear masks, and they need to do research on that. We have the three experts, the people who speak most often about the mask issue. This is Dr. Scott, Dr. Birx, Dr. Fauci. Now, if we look at this example, as you are reading, it's not enough to know the names of the experts. You also have to know who concurs, who agrees. We have 3 experts who agrees, whose research is concurring with the other research, who rebuts, who refutes the facts. And then what is quite important to know is who is the main expert and whose research will be supporting that main actor. That comes in when we want to condense our writing. I can see many people are joining now. Just remember to write your names in the, I have a separate screen so that I can watch the chat line on here. Sorry, I forgot to put my, I am just concentrating on putting my screen on permanent. Okay, if you will just remember to write your student number in the chat line. So when we have a hierarchy of experts, so it's very important as you read an article, you need to know who's the expert and what is the relationship between the article that you are reading and the expert. If we look at this, Dr. Fauci is generally seen as the expert. Dr. Birx supports him and Scott disagrees with his attitude. Do you see that if you have worked out this kind of hierarchy, that you can quote something like Dr. Fauci proposes, and this is supported by, or Dr. Fauci, and then in brackets or in commas, supported by Dr. Birx, and every time you reference correctly, proposes that. So once we have worked out the hierarchy of experts, in order to work out the hierarchy of experts when we write, we already start interpreting. So we already move away from any kind of plagiarism because we are now on the interpretation level. So it's no longer cut and paste. And then you bring your paper by thinking like that. You will write differently, and that will up the level of your quality of your writing. Now, the importance of prioritizing. First of all, it encourages critical thinking. If we go back to my little picture of these Americans, where are they? There they are. If I have to start thinking, what is he saying? Then I can still simply cut and paste. But if I start saying, does Dr. Birx agree or disagree with Dr. Fauci? I start on the road to critical thinking, and that is very important. He disagrees. On which points does he disagree? What is his motivation? So when we go to the importance of prioritizing, the first thing is the moment that we have to prioritize, we start with the process of critical thinking. Next, because we are, do you remember I spoke about the hierarchy? So immediately I start, the reader who reads in terms of whose idea was it? Is idea A more important than idea B? That you start thinking in terms of relationships and connections. And then we are back at we are building a theoretical and conceptual framework. I sometimes get in papers that landed on my desk too late, is my feeling often, because the person has done a lot of work, but they are not at the stage where they can see the relationship or the connection between ideas. And then it creates, if we start prioritizing, it creates questions about the relevance of material. Now I don't know how many of you have started an honors in the middle of the year or busy with one of the first assignments. But remember how you choose the assignment? You put in certain keywords. Now, the skill to use the keywords correctly is a skill that you develop as you develop as a researcher. But if we go back to my previous slide, can you see if I have only put in doctor and mask? As a mask, I could have had all kinds of pictures. And it would have been the same if you have only put in doctor and mask as your, or even nursing and mask as your keywords. It takes some time to develop the skill to put in the right keywords. Now, if you work on prioritizing, as you are going through your literature, and it isn't only for your literature review, as part of your report writing and everything, you are still going to work on have to read. That you can see that if by prioritizing, you can also see if the article falls without the area that you are researching. Think in terms of questionnaires. The questionnaires that you are using will be properly prepared, should be properly prepared questionnaires that you've run by Lizzie Boy. She explained to you the internal and external validity of your questionnaire, and you have carefully decided whether to use 4 points or 5 points, how you want to structure the questionnaire. Now, often if you have been to a shop or you've been served in a restaurant, they send you something to rate the quality of the service. Now, that is a different kind of questionnaire. There's a place for that kind of questionnaire. But at this stage where you are reading up about the quality of questionnaires, that's not what you need to read. So by prioritizing, we immediately start our critical thinking. What is more important than this? We start thinking in terms of connections and relationships, and that's how we build our theoretical and conceptual framework. And by building a hierarchy, we can also see not only what is of less importance, but also what is of no importance. Now, the next thing that I see that you often think is of less importance. There's one student who sends me his work regularly, and then there's a little note. Don't say anything about the table of contents, I'll do it afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't do the table of contents afterwards, because the table of contents gives you an idea of your argument. And when it's a field that I have worked in or that I know something about, and I see it's not my job to look at your content, but I look at the table of contents, I know whether you have a valid argument or not. So the function is, it indicates the main points of the argument. And because it indicates the main points of the argument, it differentiates between the main points and supporting points. By doing the table of contents, it organizes your information. And because your information is organized, you have already decided what is number 2 and what is number 3. Your paragraphs and sections become more coherent, which means that because you have decided in your table of contents, I first have to address my research design before I formulate my research questions. There is a logical flow to your presentation. And then, very important, it prevents repetition. If you have spoken about the research design early in the you will not, remember you are writing on the same paper for 3-4 weeks. Now you've been, life happens, you go back to your studies, and then you put in something totally in the wrong place because you are now thinking of it. If you have your table of contents, of course you will go back and shuffle it around. But it's still better to have a table of contents than to have no table of contents. I want you to show you an example here. The introduction, the nature, properties and components, knowledge of the first language. Then the relation between knowledge of a first language and other language capacities. Language capacities. Can you see how I moved towards this part of my argument. And then I have a discussion on the differences between knowledge of first language and knowledge of a second language. I get to my conclusion at my bibliography. And you can have respect for this table of contents. I got more than 80% for the paper. So, but do you see that if you have put a lot of planning into this part, into the table of contents, that to start writing makes it much easier. I'm going to go back so that I can see. I know I can see your remarks, but I would love to. If you have any questions at this stage, you can put up your hand or you can put it in the chat. Now we come to a bit of the writing work. Do you see that this heading it's a long heading? Thinking back, I should have taken more trouble to shorten the heading. But do you see there are no verbs in the heading? And that's something that you must remember. Your verb is the title, your heading is the title of the next section. So usually we do not have verbs in our headings. Now, when we look at the paragraph construction, in this case, before we, I chose these figures on purpose. A paragraph has a beginning, things happen in the middle, and then it has a definite end. And the end of your paragraph must be an extremely neat ending. Do you see that there's a kind of repetition in this symbol for a paragraph? And that is exceptionally true of academic writing. And academic writing follows certain principles with the paragraph construction. I had to fill in forms about the students I've seen this just in September. I easily see up to 12 study guides and tutorial 12 different modules in a month. All of them have this instruction. Your sentence start with a topic sentence. If you are taking notes, the topic sentence usually is the sentence which tells the reader what you want to prove in that paragraph. Then, depending, those of you who are now working on your research proposals, you have now said something. Van der Merwe reference requires, according to Van der Merwe, research requires validity. Now you have to give an example of validity and application. That is followed by an explanation. Why is that an application of or an example or an illustration? But do you see that you can't decide whether you have to give an example? I'm going to give you an example of a paragraph with an example. Why you can't give there's a difference between an example and an application. And if you didn't read critically, if you haven't gone through this thought process, you don't know what to do. Well, it's difficult to do the first one, and 2 and 3 you miss out completely. Therefore, you can't link your main idea and your topic sentence. I've seen some where you definitely have a link between where the structure is like this. One can see something should fit on there. And that's also fine, as long as it is a very neat conclusion. When you have written a section like an introduction or the validity, research, design, whatever, you should actually take the first sentence of every paragraph, leave out everything in between, and those sentences making up the first sentence of your paragraphs should actually illustrate the validity of your argument to you that you want to make in that section. I'm going to show you an example. This is the paragraph that followed the heading I showed you. Can you see in this is knowledge of a language allows a user to produce, comprehend, and judge utterances intuitively. Because this knowledge cannot be examined directly, the nature of this knowledge can only be deduced from utterances and the intuitive response to utterances. We had to, when I did my master's, the requirement was that we number the examples like this. I've not seen a tutorial letter where they require you to, your examples are more incorporated, but it's fine. It doesn't matter. Do you see? Now I give my example. My name is Françoise, not Francis, insisted the little girl. Françoise cannot motivate her objection to the pronunciation. I go into the explanation by referring to spelling. Therefore, the reasons for her protest cannot be proven true or false. Thus, the knowledge is tacit and not scientific. If we go back, do you see I've done one? But in order to complete my argument, I need to do something else. I want to add something. And often I see that The problem is that when you should be adding something, it gets lost. And when I've coded some of the problem assignments I've had, so that I can give you advice on how to avoid that problem. And I think the problem starts with the reading, that while you are reading, it is the critical thinking lags behind. And it becomes difficult when we read on a screen. This is now reading on a screen. If this had been a paper and you could make remarks and underline and add and scratch out, it makes it so much better. But I understand your problem. Many of the articles are very long and it's difficult, but you must engage by setting yourself questions. And I've given you the model. There are other models as well, but I think at the stage where I am reading your work at the moment, you need to work with a hierarchy, because that will already condense your writing. So I had my topic, I have my example plus explanation. Then I have my second example. We were in France when she was born and decided to use their spelling and pronunciation, explained her mother. Then I explain how this fits in with the topic sentence I've had there. And now I move to the abstract. Now I conclude my paragraph. Where knowledge of a language enables a person to use the language intuitively, knowledge about a language provides a person with concepts to reflect. Can you see the link between, because this is the little picture I want you to have of a paragraph. It starts very neatly. It has a structure that can be repeated in the middle, and it has a beautiful end. And sometimes that one is, of course, our conclusion. Nothing needs to fit in there, but here we need to fit a next one. Are there any questions or any remarks about work you've done up till now that you wish to share with us? Am I speaking too quickly? I'd be glad if you give me feedback, because it feels as if I'm rushing through the paper and it's not necessary. We have enough time. By this time, I recognize some of the names because I've seen their work or had to work with them or so on. So the next line. This is a problem that some of you have in the research proposals I've seen. There's a difference whether you have to refute an argument, you have to rebut it, you have to prove it wrong, or whether you had an option or you had to select, you had the choice. Now, the implication for the research proposal is that in the research proposal, you are working with options. Remember, it starts off whether you are going to do the qualitative approach or the quantitative approach. So that is an option. And the nature of the research determines the nature of your design. Are you going to go qualitative or are you going to go quantitative? But you don't need to rebut. You don't need to write anything about if you have chosen a qualitative approach. You don't even need to refer to the quantitative approach. You only need to add the motivations for why you have chosen this. I keep on telling you how to use fewer words, but I think it's one of the business modules. You have to have 15 articles, chapters of books, and same for criminology. You have a long reading list, and then you have to condense it, sometimes to 23, 24 pages. If you want to make your point, you can't waste words telling the lecturer why you didn't choose the quantitative approach. That part of the research process you have most probably done earlier when you had to compare the two methods. It was part of an earlier design, assignment. It's not part of the research proposal. So how do I condense information? If we go back to my example of the 3 experts with 1 problem. Dr. Fauci agrees that people should wear masks. He is more well known, he is more of an expert than Dr. Birx. So I don't have to have a full sentence saying Dr. Fauci says wear a mask and Dr. Birx says wear a mask. I can use several constructions to make sure that I have that in one short sentence. But do you see that you can only have that short sentence if you have answered this kind of question while you are writing. I had several research proposals in August and September. Now, many of them referred, I can't remember what the guy's name was, but it's obvious that he is the big guru about research. And many people agreed with him, and then they added something. But it's not necessary to mention every single expert who said that you should have external and internal validity. And how do you know who is the main expert? It is if she quotes him, then he is the main expert. So for the research proposal, you must remember that you have made certain choices, and you have to motivate those choices. So if we go back to the paragraph construction, your topic sentence will be, this researcher has decided to use questionnaires supplemented by interviews as recommended by. Then you give an example or you apply. Then you have the explanation, why did you apply it like that? The interviews will be in a venue acceptable to the interviewee, because they may feel uncomfortable speaking to a researcher in an open office. Therefore, great care will be taken not only to have the questionnaires and interviews up to standard, but also to keep them within the fields of ethics. So how do we condense information? When we quote and what to quote, a big source of concern on my side is that I suspect much of the writing that I see is unintended plagiarism. I see too many people who quote, but there are no inverted commas to indicate that they are using the exact words of the original author. I'm worried about that because often, because if you leave out the quotes, remember we've spoken about citation and paragraphs and references. If you leave out the quotation marks, you state, not imply, you state that you are using your own words. It's not your own words, and I can see that because often the part that is referenced is in a different writing style from the rest of the essay. I can pick up when it is what I call your voice and when it is something else. And if that something else is not in inverted commas, Turnitin may pick it up as not original. And that will entail in at the draft version a lot of rewriting. So when you use the words, and often the words it's so well spoken that it's difficult to paraphrase, then you need to put in quotation marks. But you can incorporate more than one expert in your quotation. If people agree, you don't have to quote all of them. You choose the most important one, and then you can indicate if any of them, if any other research has supported that. And I'll show you now how you can actually incorporate more than one expert. You have to decide what is enough information. And that is a conversation that you can only have if you have critically engaged with the work. And your supervisor must help you with that. Write a letter using your email, My Life email account with your number in the subject line, and ask him how many examples. And then, what is your main idea and what is the supporting ideas? Can you see that that's the main idea? Those are the supporting ideas. And it should be like this. That's why your good writing starts with using a table of contents. Because the supporting ideas may also be, maybe you need to incorporate them there. Now that I've done so much in academic writing and have done so many workshops, if I look at my own academic writing, I didn't use, and I used 2 short paragraphs. Several of my chapters must have been difficult to read. So when we condense information, we decide who and what to quote. If more than one expert agrees, we incorporate 1 or 2, but we don't need everyone. What is enough information? And you distinguish between the main idea and the supporting idea. Now, for instance, I've given you 2 tools. The one is this a website. I posted it in the chat line. This is a very, very handy website. Transitional words and phrases, you can actually read through everything. But what they have done is they have categorized the transition words and phrases. So let's take this one, intensification. Say, for instance, one person's research suggested that masks make a difference. Then somebody else's proved it. There was it was more intense, the proof. Dr. Birx's research undoubtedly proved that, or indeed proved that. So when you know where you are in your argument, you can actually go and find several words that will help you. And we have more than one expert. Combinations. The one that I didn't even think of because I played a little game with myself and I looked, and besides Dr. Fauci reference, Dr. Birx also found that. Do you see, I don't need two separate sentences to do that. So the first tool I'm giving you is this website. I have a copy on my computer because if I get lazy, especially I don't know, I have a problem with conclusions, then it's nice to have a look here and see how can I indicate that I am now writing a conclusion. The second piece of advice I'm giving you is this, the phrase bank. So we want to have two experts in one sentence, they agree. Many scientists have argued that, and there you put your. Do you see? Surveys such as that conducted by. And then you can, and so-and-so date have shown that. So the phrase bank, oops, I thought I've opened. I want to show those of you who haven't seen the phrase bank, the academic phrase bank. They really have a list of words and phrases. And by knowing where am I in my argument, am I highlighting a controversy in the field, or am I highlighting a knowledge gap? So far, there has been little discussion, but if it's a knowledge gap, too little attention has been paid to. So I think the academic phrase bank will honestly help you a lot. What I want to bring to your attention at the moment is that you need to develop the habit of conscious writing. Conscious writing means that you are conscious of the way in which you are writing. Before I started work at UNISA, I often wrote creatively, and I often wrote kind of memoirs when if I ever wrote. So when I started working with the academic writing, I had to think, and I have to sit down and say, I don't want to surprise you. I want, as you do in creative writing, I am now wanting to inform you. What skills do I need now? And I could only improve my writing when I started reading more academically. And my advice to you would be to read in while you are reading, connect, think in terms of, and see if you can recognize good writing, because the academic writing that you are reading at the moment had been edited and changed and adapted quite a bit. So you can actually learn from it a lot. I want to know, you have been the quietest class I've ever had. Did all of you write your student numbers in the chat line, please? I want to complete those are the transition words, the phrase bank. And now I want to give you an example of how to condense sentences. One of the ways that we can make, you've already made a good sentence, but now you are seriously running out of pages, so you need to make it shorter. One of the tips that I can give you is that you can take the verbs, change them to nouns, the sentence will become shorter. Also, see, remember I asked you, do I need to give all the information? Now I'm going to give you a sentence. See, you can work in the chat line. It will be interesting for me to see. See if you can make that sentence much shorter. I'm giving you about 3 minutes. I would really like you to write in the chat line, because it will give us an interesting idea of how we can work. Adele was brave enough to try and put, come on people, see if you can. It's interesting what's coming through. Remember, I said to you that you are defending your option. You are not rebutting another proposal. So instead of using the quantitative design, can be left out. An example of tautology would be new trends. You don't get old trends. If something is trending, it's new. What I want you to see is, first of all, this sentence is perfect. But too many of such long sentences doesn't give you enough space for all your good ideas. So new trends, that's tautology. And if you look at convicted pedophiles on parole, how can you be on parole if you haven't been convicted? So this was my, oh, sorry, I'm at the wrong, this was my first effort. Can you use the verbs to nouns, that structure? To improve this sentence, because this sentence also doesn't have any grammar mistakes. Did you see? I looked at my verbs and I saw that I could make, if I make investigation, I can make the sentence a bit shorter. So, sorry, it's my... If we want to write academically, it starts by really engaging with the reading matter. We ask ourselves questions while we are reading. One, there are different models, and I think I've exposed you to different models through the years, or through this year at least. But the one would be to read, to get an idea of what are the main theories and which theory is more important than the next one, or how do the theories overlap? Who are my experts? And what is the relationship between the experts that I have? What is the relationship between the experts? What is the hierarchy? Because that helps me to interpret and to move from cutting and pasting to really using my own ideas, and therefore I can present my own ideas. And I promise you it's better to have a half-baked idea, because it's my job to get you to make it a clear idea. It is the job of the supervisor to guide you to a better idea than to have somebody else's idea cut and paste. Then, once you have engaged with the work, you will have more ideas than you can fit into the 20 or 30 or 40 pages. So how do I then condense my work? I know which experts agree, so I can put them in one sentence, or I can quote only the most important one. An example would be in my field, Chomsky is regarded as the main linguist. You don't quote somebody else to support Chomsky. Once you've quoted Chomsky, it's fine. You don't need to support him. Everybody knows he's the bright boy. When I have my sentences, I look for things like tautology, new trends, and I also take my verbs, some of my verbs, I change them into nouns. That will definitely shorten the sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a question, just raise your hand. It's not necessary to type in the, I can give you the permission to unmute yourself. Are there any questions at this stage? Mr. van Rooyen, do you see that you could have left out that the researcher intends to use a qualitative design to investigate trends in monitoring convicted pedophiles? Paroled pedophiles. Because if I say somebody's on parole, I imply he had been convicted. Okay, I got all of you with that new trends, but that's the difference between ordinary language and academic language. And I got all of you with that convicted and paroled. Now, next Thursday, I'm going to organize somebody to speak about their specific journey. NS, I can't see you, Naren, you may unmute yourself.
Good evening, Melanie. Thank you.
Yes.
My question is, firstly, I would like to thank you for spending this time and going through your content with us. But I think one of my difficulties in academic writing is constructing the paragraphs, as you mentioned previously. Will this presentation be made available to the students who are currently viewing this online session? And if you can perhaps guide me in terms of the sentence construction, basically the different parts of your paragraph, as you outlined there, is there any further guidance or advice you can perhaps give me in constructing paragraphs and in terms of my subject topic?
Mr. Naren, You can make an appointment with me, then we can have a, a Teams call.
Okay.
That's not a problem. I am just busy. I'm not very available tomorrow, and Saturday morning I need to teach between 9 and 11. But it's if we make an appointment, I put it on Teams and we can have a discussion. That's not a problem, and you can contact me on the chat line or via my email that I've given you.
Okay, that would be perfect.
And that goes for everybody. What I would like you to do is, if you are like Naren, uncertain of anything, I'm being paid by the hour, and we can actually claim for half an hour if need be. So if you have to write something, don't finish the 8 or 9 pages or however many pages you have. You don't need to finish that and give it to me. Usually, you don't develop new mistakes between your introduction and conclusion. You keep on repeating the same mistakes all the time. So if you are really worried about your writing, you can contact me. Either the chat shows me if there is somebody needs me, and I check the chats quite regularly, or you can write to my, I'll put in my email here again, and we can make it, you can send me 2 or 3 or 1 page at a time, and I'll look at it and then I can speak to you. There was a student who sent me something and I sent it back, and then we had a discussion, and then she sent me one more, and now she's fine. It was just something that she needed to sort out. So don't wait until you have done 30 pages and now you have to redo a lot. You can contact me after you have written a page.
Thank you, Mimi. Much appreciated.
Okay. Anybody else who has a problem regarding your academic work? Guys, I want to tell you that you are heroes. The country and all of us have been through a very, very difficult time. And today I was listening to the news and they spoke about investors and investing and whatever. You guys are doing a long-term investment, and you are persevering at a time when many people are struggling. I really admire each and every one of you. So I'll see you then next Thursday. And thank you very much for coming. And if you have any problems, you can honestly contact me. Even if I get to your letters or things late at night, I usually check my emails very regularly. I have my goddaughter is bringing the new boyfriend to dinner, so I am going to make food now. I hope you have a lovely night and see you next week.